history where Moses and his generation are leading the people of Israel to the promised land. But something's holding them back. They sent spies to look at the promised land, and Joshua was among the spies, and he was a leader at the time. They saw that it was heavily walled and giants walled the land, and came back with negative reports to Moses. Everyone except for Joshua and his friend Caleb, they came back and said, I think we can do it. Joshua's generation, that age group, had grown up paying for the mistakes of the generation before. Yet they had the most optimism of what was ahead. Let's look at this in Numbers 14, 7 through 9. They said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, He will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless praying to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Joshua kept his faith and remembered the promise that God had told the nation of Israel. And he wanted to continue. He said, let's not wait, let's go on and fight. God has promised us victory in everything we do, but the rest of the generation was afraid. And unfortunately, Moses listened to the other people at this time. And let me tell you something today. God has a promised land set out for us and for our generation. We just have to follow and realize 4 things for our generation to claim the promised land. The first thing is keep focused on God's promises. Keep focused on God's promises. Brent said it last week in his sermon, and I already had this one written up, and I thought it was weird how he said it and I said it. That means it's very important. It means God wants us to realize that. We have got to stay focused. And in today's time, there's so many things that we can do to not be focused. We have to remember who we belong to and what He has spoken over our life. We belong to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and there's nothing that we can't do through Him. We have to stay away from the distractions that the devil throws at us. Cell phone, TV, girls, boys, busyness. That's something the devil's going to bog you down with. That's what he likes to attack me with. He makes me so busy that I can't focus on God. And that's where my focus needs to be at all times. Anything that can take you away from God. When I was writing this message, I was trying to think of an example of this. How many of you seen the movie Up? It came out when I was like a sophomore, so yeah, a lot of people, wow. Well, you remember that dog in Up? He'd be talking and he'd be like, squirrel, squirrel. He'd be like, yes sir, squirrel. That's what I was thinking about. How we're totally focused on God, we're like, cell phone. Oh, pretty girl. Oh, boy. I wouldn't say that. Unfortunately, fear won out that day in Israel. And Moses listened to the negative feedback. The people of God failed to realize that it wasn't what they could do, but what God could do through them. And I don't want that to be us. We have to remember what God can do through us. And it doesn't even compare with what we can do, because what we can do by ourselves is nothing. God can use us in mightier ways than we ever thought possible. They experienced 40 years of wandering in the desert because of this mistake. And if I was Joshua and his generation, I'd been thinking, well, thanks guys, you done ruined it for us. Now we're wasting half of our life just wandering in the desert before we can claim the promised land. And there's going to be times where our generation looks doomed and the world looks doomed. There's going to be times where we think, oh great, they ruined it for us. We can't do nothing now. But that leads to my second point. We have to endure. There's going to be hard times in your life, but you got to fight through those hard times. What if Joshua and his generation said, you know what, I'm done. God, I gave up on you. What would have happened to Israel? There's no telling. They would have been wiped off the face of the planet, about that. But Joshua and his generation stayed focused. And they endured through the hard times because they remember God's promises over their life. And we have to do the same. God didn't promise easy sailing, but He did promise He would be with us through every storm we face in our life. Don't you ever forget that. We have to remember we already have victory through Jesus. And we have to remember what God has called us to do and the importance of our generation. We have to remember we were made for this. God chose us because He knew we could handle it. I think that'd be a good t-shirt idea. We were made for this. Dad's college worship experience. We might have to do that sometime. I don't really like that. We have to remember that every storm in our life eventually comes to an end. And just like the 40 years eventually came to an end for Joshua and his generation. So now Joshua is the leader. Moses has passed away and Joshua is in charge. And the new generation is rising up and ready to claim the promised land. But God stopped them and said, you're not fit yet to claim the promised land. Let's look at that in Joshua 5, verses 2 through 3. At that time the Lord told Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the second generation of Israelites. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the entire male population of Israel at Gibeath Haarath. For those of you that don't know what circumcise is, Blake Davis will be available in the lobby after service to explain it to you. Thank you, Blake. They were not circumcised yet, and that was what had to happen before they could march on and claim the promised land. Circumcision in the New Testament is different, but just as, and maybe more painful. We're going to look at Romans 2, 28 through 29. For you are not a true Jew just because you were born of Jewish parents or because you have gone through the ceremony of circumcision. No, a true Jew is one whose heart is right with God, and true circumcision is not merely obeying the letter of the law. Rather, it is a change of heart produced by God's Spirit. And a person with a changed heart seeks praise from God and not from people. Everything that is set up right now, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're looking for praise from other people. We're looking for that person to like that photo. We're looking to see how many likes we can get on Facebook. That's how I know. I'm sure the rest of us will like that too. We look like, oh, I got 30 likes on that one, I'm popular. But we should not be looking for the praise of others, but we should be looking for God to praise us. And God is saying, you know what? I approve what you're doing, I'm going to bless it. So that brings me to point 3. God has to work in us before He can work through us. That's very important. God is not going to be able to do what He wants to do through our generation unless we allow Him to work in us and through us. God has to circumcise some things in our life where He can use our life for the better. What are some things that God has to cut away in your life before you can take that next step? It could be pride. It could be just the simple fact that you need to realize that you're not going for how many likes you get on Instagram or Facebook, but you're going for approval from God. It could be your self-reliance. You could be relying on yourself too much to do what God has called you to do in your life. And you have to swallow that up, and God has to cut that away. And God will use you. It could be your fear. It could be something you fear, and God has to cut it away. I fear speaking, but He's cut that away. And it could be people. It could be that relationship you're in that is not godly. It could be one of your friends that keeps bringing you down rather than you bringing him up. It could be another number of things. Whatever it is, I want you to search your heart and ask God, what do you need to take away from my life? And we all have to do it together before God can use our generation. Moses' generation refused to listen to God and didn't have faith, and they missed out on the next step God planned for their life. Joshua's generation humbled themselves to follow what God has called them to do and have faith, and God took them to the next step and delivered them into the promised land. So once you stay focused, you endure through the hard times, and God cuts away from your life what needs to be cut away, then God is ready to use us to restore them. And that's point 4. Be ready to claim the promised land and change the world. I'm going to ask the band to come up here and play. God is ready to use our generation to do things that we never even thought possible. I say that all the time because I believe it so much. Last Sunday at church, preached a sermon very similar to our first sermon about hope and about how God is ready to use us to do great things. And I told the people at Rushwood, I said, God is ready to change the world. And I'm here to tell you today there's a young generation rising up, and we're ready to take our place. I told them I see it every Saturday night. I told them I see it out and about. I see it on Facebook. I love seeing what Danielle posts on Facebook. She posted, "Give me faith," the other day. I was like, there it is. That's what we all need to be doing. And others are posting things on Facebook as well, and Twitter, and Instagram. I love what I'm seeing from them. We're letting God's light shine through us. It's going to take some work. And it's going to be hard. Because we see how bad the world is right now. But God is strong. He's stronger than anything we will ever face. And He sees this generation. He's looking down on us right now. And He sees each one of you here today. And He said, I see your heart. I see what you want to do. And I'm going to honor that. And I'm going to work through you. Think about if we pack this out with 75 plus people. That's my goal in people. 75 in one Saturday night worship service. When they could be out partying, they could be out doing drugs, but they're here on Saturday night praising God.